So, hello, welcome to Conversations with myself, Marléne, and Pascale, my wonderful colleague. And today we are going to be talking about inner child. What is the inner child, and why is it so important that we connect with our inner child? So, first of all, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Marléne Rose Shaw, a therapist and a coach and an author of self-help books. And over to you, Pascale.
Thank you. So I am Pascale. I'm a relationship and confidence coach, and I help women, typically in their kind of 40s, early 50s, to heal into the life they deserve with more confidence, happiness, and success.
So brilliant. Yes, we're very similar in what we do. We overlap quite a lot, don't we?
We do. We
love helping people get more confident and really step into their lives. You know, it's this thing about so many people spend so much of their time sort of worrying about what other people think and people pleasing and not really saying what they want and stepping forward and really getting the most out of their lives. And I think for us to be able to help people do that is such a buzz, isn't it?
It's a buzz. Actually, I was in one of my peer group spaces in on Facebook in one of the groups, and one of the ladies in there said, you know, what an adrenaline rush it is when she helps her clients like hit the subconscious jackpot. And I couldn't help. I like lit up immediately. Like my heart started racing. I was just like, helping your clients have that breakthrough is just the best feeling. It's such a rush. That's why we do what we do, isn't it? Just because it's just amazing.
It really is. Yeah.
Whatever it is we help them do, whether it's business, whether it's relationship, whether it's self-love, you know, whatever they have, whatever that breakthrough is, it's just so satisfying.
Transformation junkies.
Absolutely.
a big part of that. A big part of this work, from my experience, and I think you'll agree, Pascale, is that it's about connecting with that inner child who is still there.
Runs the show a lot of the time. You know, a lot of the time really is running the show, actually. And I think until we, you know, collectively, until we understand that, we can often act and behave in a way that isn't always that logical, doesn't always make sense, but it's that kind of instant response that kind of kicks in. And that's why I love talking about it, because I think once we understand that, I think a lot of people poo-poo the inner child, like, oh, you know, that's what a load of rubbish, you know, like I'm a grown-up now, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I've got this, I've got that. But
you know, I often say that I think for much of the time we're just kids going around in grown-up clothes, doing grown-up work. You know, the research shows that about 95% at least of our lives are dictated by the subconscious. You know, 95% of what we do, what we think, what we believe, what we feel, how we behave, the choices we make are just programming, you know, and that's where the inner child lives. So it's kind of important that we get in touch with that, because the subconscious doesn't know that it's, you know, we're in the 21st century, there's 2023, or it's, you know, whatever. The subconscious thinks it's, you know, the beginning of the century or way back in the last century, depending on when we were born. So there's no calendar.
Absolutely.
There's nothing in the subconscious that says, oh, it's okay, change now. You know, every version of ourselves is still there. Whether we're fully aware of it, whether we remember it from time to time, or whether we're not aware of it at all, it's still there, like you say, running the show. So it's really important, and that's the transformational work quite often, is being able to get in touch with that inner child and, you know, have a chat with them and soothe them and notice. You know, I often say to people, when you feel really upset, you know, just stop and say, how old do I feel right now? And it'll probably be 5 or 8 or something. But then you can calm yourself and talk to that child, and then you can be more adult in how you behave and how you respond to situations.
Absolutely. I mean, so much of the work that we do, so much of the work that I do, and I presume the same for you as well, is that those formative years. You know, I talk about it all the time. I'm really big on the formative years, because that's where we develop our sense of self. That's where we learn everything that there is to learn about ourselves, relationships, love, communication, trust, conflict, all of that stuff. And so we can adult quite well on a conscious level. But I always like to think of it, and I was doing this in my group last week, actually. I like to keep things really simple, and I like to think of it like when we have a emotional response that is irrational, that is disproportionate to the context of what is going on. I bet you that is your inner child there kicking up a response. And it doesn't always make it, like I said, it's usually a really irrational response. But it's there, and it's there because that's when we get triggered, and then all of this kind of like bubbling up kind of comes from inside. And it happens in a good way as well. Like we tend to talk about it. I tend to talk about it. The literature tends to be kind of like a negative perspective. But I mean, of course, it happens in good ways too. Like I can't walk past a button without pressing it. You know, like, if ever there's a counter with a button on it, I can't help but press it. You know, it's just that little mischievous just part of me that just wants to kind of like, oh, if I just do this, what happens? But it is like you say, it's the subconscious is running the show so much. And I think the more that we understand that, and the more we're in tune with that, and the more we acknowledge that little girl or boy actually just wants to be seen and heard. And that's actually what's going on. Just needs a little bit of nurturing, a little bit of compassion in that moment. I think the world would be a very different place if everybody paid a little bit more attention.
Oh yes, yeah, we wouldn't have children running countries, would we?
Yes.
You know, or people in child running countries. And you're quite right, actually, about the in child thing, because psychologists tend to say somebody's gone into child, they're talking about what we call the adapted child, which is the negative sort of experience, rather than the free child, which is the pressing of the buttons and the liking the sweeties and going into stationery shops and seeing all the pens and the pencils and love that. Yeah. I get to do my art because I did a lot of art as a kid. You see how that happens? You know, it's like we go back there, don't we? We go
absolutely.
And it's interesting actually what you said about it, because you went like that, because when we go into child, like in that sort of overwhelming way, in that perhaps not so positive way, you can feel that rush, can't you? You can just, it's like your emotions completely overtake you in a few seconds, and you feel it rise up in you, and you get defensive or whatever, you know, some unhelpful sort of behavior. And actually it's a very palpable feeling, isn't it? And there's part of the conscious mind that's saying, what are you doing? Stop it. But it's too overwhelming, isn't it? It's too powerful. And that's what children are like. They don't stand there and say, I think maybe I'll think how I'll react to this or respond to this situation. They just go.
Yeah.
That's what happens to us, isn't it? But also the joyful side as well, you know, when you get that excited feeling.
Yeah. So how do you think it shows up? I mean, you know, well, we both do couple work. I don't do couple work anymore, but I mean, you do. So how do you see inner child work presenting in your couples work that you do?
Oh, all the time. And actually, I was just going to say, I think at some point it would be great if we did a workshop with based around TA. You know, the parent, adult, child, the parts of ourselves. And I actually show my couples clients TA all the time, virtually every couple I work with, because it shows up in this sort of, won't go into details here, but it shows up in a sort of conflict where one is being quite a critical parent, quite sort of bossy and critical, and then they kind of invite the other one into their child, their sort of reactive child, and then they start doing this parent-child, 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 and that's when couples particularly have arguments that they keep going on and on and on. They can't seem to get out of the argument. It's just like, I want to have the last word. No, I want to have the last word. And sometimes people say we can't even remember what we started arguing about.
Yeah,
it was some minor thing, but it was
something so stupid. Yeah.
Child, and sometimes you get couples going child to child. They're both in child, in a negative child sort of place when they're having this, and they're both kind of saying, "No, I'm hurting. No, I'm hurting more than you. No, you hurt me more than I hurt you." And that's what's going on, isn't it? And it's when we can recognize that, when couples I work with, once they see this model and they're able to recognize that, wow, they can laugh about it then with each other, and also, but they can say, well, how could I be a bit more adult here? How could I resolve this conflict by being a little bit more logical and a little bit more practical? So it's so powerful to recognize when you're in child, on both counts actually, because when you're in excited, happy child, you can really enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my mind's kind of like casting back to like loads of couples that I've worked with, where they get obvious to us as you're saying it, but like the parent-child dynamic, or actually more. Thinking of a few couples that I've worked with where it's child. And it's very difficult to work with you when you've got child actually, because you really feel it's very difficult to kind of manage that in a way that's kind of like supportive and therapeutic and what have you, without kind of like, I have to check myself sometimes and without going like, what the hell are you both doing? Like, this is ridiculous.
I'm not mummy. Stop both of you complaining to me about the other one.
Mother mode.
Yeah, but it's lovely work to do, and it's lovely to help people shift that, because we all get into these patterns. I mean, I go into child at least once a day, usually because I'm swearing at my laptop because it's playing up or something. But we all have those moments, and then I catch myself and take a breath and think, okay, it's just a laptop. It's okay. You're all right. Don't worry about it. Soothe myself.
Yeah, I mean,
I
very much. I was talking about this with somebody last week. I very much go into child mode whenever there's kind of like a fear of rejection. So I mean, that is my absolute soft spot. I mean, I'm quite logical, quite balanced. I mean, my husband might not agree with that, but I think I'm quite logical and quite balanced and fair, like most of the time. But whenever there's that kind of rejection wound, like any glimpse of that at all, I really have to work hard to kind of check myself, talk myself down, really. And so, and I give that on purpose when I speak about that, because I want to kind of like demonstrate to our audience and my clients and my audience who I share it with, that it doesn't matter how. And I'm like going to do like quotation marks here, because I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, but I'm saying, like, it doesn't matter how evolved we are. It doesn't matter how many degrees or diplomas we've got. It doesn't matter how reflective and learned we are on our personal development journey. We are all capable of being triggered, and we are all capable of being vulnerable. Well, and I mean that with compassion to myself and also compassion to others, that it's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about, that this is a part of life. Actually, the most important gift that we can give ourselves is compassion, that it's okay. Like, it's okay that she's still in there and that she's still hurting. Like, and maybe she will always be there and she will always be hurting. But the secret is, the key is to acknowledge that and be okay with that, rather than just push it away and pretend it's not happening. Like, the more that I give myself compassion for acknowledging her, that's probably all I can do at this point, is when that trigger comes up, is just to kind of go, it's okay, like we're okay. Like, we're safe, you know.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? It's about recognizing what's happening and then being able to access that other nurturing part of yourself, to speak to her and soothe her and let her know that it's all, you've got this, it's fine. I actually, as we're talking, I recall that in my first book, which is Out of Fear into Love, I actually have a chapter on this, and I have an exercise on how to connect with your inner child. And it's an exercise that I do with my clients sometimes, and they write a letter to their inner child. And
I've got the same in my book too.
Thank them for, you know, for all the stuff that they've done for them. And when my clients bring those letters in, honestly, we're in tears. Because it's such a shift.
Snot fest.
It's such a shift when somebody's able to read out something they've written and they've said, you know, thank you for trying to look after me, little one, but I've got this now. You can go and play now. You don't need to do this anymore. And it's such a powerful thing. And I often recommend to people that, you know, if you had a nickname when you were little, talk to. So I was called Mimi when I was little. So I'll often say, "Oh, Mimi,
I love Mimi.
You're all right, Mimi. You're okay, Mimi." You know, I'll often do that. And if you didn't have a nickname, just say little Pascale, or, you know, little whatever the person's name is. And that's really powerful as well, just because it really sort of makes you more connected with that inner child, because they've got a name then.
Love that.
Did you have a nickname when you were little?
Well, so I still have the nickname. so I was Patch growing up.
Patch.
Patch. Don't ask me why. It was always Patch. I think my dad started it. And so to my only to my close friends and family, or immediate friends and family, I'm still Patch. But like it took a while to kind of it took a while to become Pascale, to be honest with you. I mean, it was a quite a long journey to becoming Pascale. There was a lot of hard work involved, to be honest with you. But like, a couple of people still call me Patch. I mean, my dad's not with us anymore, unfortunately. My mum calls me Patch, my brother calls me Patch. But you know, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm going to digress now, it's relevant. It's a relevant sidestep. You know, we talked about this at Christmas. I think this is one of our very, very first videos that we did. When we were talking about, you know, preparing for the Christmas dinner table, and how you can do Sunday lunch if you want to, how we all revert back to our place, don't we, at the dinner? So even though I am, you know, like where I am now, I will always be the youngest sibling at the dinner table, you know? And so it's quite apt, really, that you mentioned the nickname, because to them I will always be Patch, because I'm my mum's daughter and my brother's little sister, you know. So it just kind of like made me smile, and I revert to mode when I'm there, you know, like my brother and I will squabble.
So he's in child as well.
Yes, yeah, except we tend to do it with a bit of wine, which kind of makes it a bit more lighthearted. But yeah, absolutely. I think my brother's inner child definitely runs the show, to be honest with you.
And that's all, it's all fine, isn't it? If we recognize that it's part of life, isn't it? And a lot of time people talk about self-love and, what is self-love? And we can talk about that more in other videos, can't we? But, this self-love, people, I don't know if you found, but when I mention self-love to clients, they will say, oh yes, I go to the gym and I have a good diet. And I said, it's brilliant. It's self-care. That's part of self-love. That's brilliant. But the other big part of self-love is how we talk to ourselves. And actually, it's quite often the little child within that we're talking to when we talk to ourselves.
Absolutely.
So if we're, oh, damn, you made a mistake, aren't you awful? You're rubbish. You never get that right. You're just bullying your inner child and knocking your confidence. So if we can learn to speak to our inner child with love, that's what self-love is about. A lot of self-love is about connecting with the inner child.
Why don't we do our next video on self-love?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Should we do that? Because I think that because there's loads I can talk about on that. Like we can both talk about on that. I can feel myself getting ready to ramp up again.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Do we want to say anything to our audience about inner child before we finish?
Well, there's lots, isn't there? I mean, I think first of all, we've touched on one part of it already, but I think first of all, what I would invite our audience to do is to just acknowledge that everybody has an inner child, no matter who you are, what your background, what your education, everybody does. So acknowledge that. And like I said, like it's usually the bit where if you can cast your mind back to a situation or situations where your emotional response has been disproportionate to the event. People often talk about road rage. Road rage is a really easy example of where something happens and that kind of that comes up, which is just absolutely ridiculous. You wouldn't behave like that in any other situation. So just take time to acknowledge it, and then the exercise that we've both got in our books, but that you've already mentioned, Marléne, to sit down and write a letter. But I think probably I would say get in touch. I think if this is something that is problematic for somebody, or they feel that they need a bit of help or guidance with, get in touch with either of us. I'll put the links in the comments section below the video so that it doesn't ruin our reach or with the algorithms. Let's chat.
All right. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will also be on the link below this video.
Wonderful. You sound very grown up. I'm feeling very inner child giggly right now.
How are you? So little Mimi's coming out to play, is she?
Okay. All right. So brilliant. So let's say goodbye for now and just be kind to yourselves. Be kind, love yourselves. And the more you are, the better life will be.
Love it.
Or as a little child say.